When you think of the Nazis, you probably think of images like this: Adolf Hitler in full dress uniform and groups of soldiers. While such impressions are not wrong, they also aren't the whole picture. Hitler and the top Nazis weren't always plotting strategy and directing soldiers. They also had time for more leisurely activities, especially during the 7 years the Nazis were in power before the war started. You probably don't picture Adolf Hitler wearing ordinary clothes and interacting with young children who call him Uncle Adolf. Yet here he is, doing just that. You might think that Hitler's lover, Eva Braun, when not entertaining guests at the Berghof, spent much of her time doing more casual activities such as exercising. That impression is not wrong. Being Europeans, top Nazis and their families celebrated all the usual European holidays, as well as some specifically German ones. When the weather was good, they often engaged in swimming and water sports, and had time to clown around. Even the elderly and the middle-aged would join in. They also had pets, and their pets adored them pretty much as ours adore us. At this point, I need to acknowledge that a lot of you find these scenes, which come from the film collection of Hitler's lover, Eva Braun, to be quite disturbing. Over the years, many, including I myself, have felt the same emotion. But why? Though they committed many monstrous acts, and I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that, they were not monsters. They were human beings very much like you and I, and they did most of the same things that we do. It is this very fact that we find so disturbing, as it forces us to acknowledge that just as they were very much like us, we ourselves are very much like they were. And as they did so many of the same things that we do, we also have the potential for committing the same kinds of monstrous acts that they did. Lest we delude ourselves, we must also acknowledge that such atrocities are not limited to a particular ideology or group. Though they have the word socialist in their titles, Nazis are considered to be to the right in the political spectrum. Hitler's contemporary and enemy, Joseph Stalin, was clearly to the left, and the same is true of Stalin's contemporary, Mao Zedong, who was just beginning to come into power during World War II. Yet few now or then would refer to either as a saint. Indeed, they are considered to be two of the biggest mass murderers of all time, perhaps second and third only to Hitler himself. At the time, people would look at the Holocaust and say, it must never happen again. The trouble is that it has happened, and more than once, just not on quite as large a scale. There was a far-right regime in Argentina, for example, which was responsible for the disappearance and apparent murder of thousands with dissenting views. In Cambodia, the leftist Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, decided to impose their own brand of communism and establish an agricultural paradise in which all the citizens would become peasants, living a life of subsistence farming. The corrupting influence, as they put it, of city life and modern technology would be eliminated. People were not given any choice. They were forced out of the cities and onto farms, with all their modern appliances and vehicles confiscated. Of course, not everybody agreed with this philosophy, and as in any authoritarian regime, right or left, dissent was not tolerated. As a result, over 1 million people were executed for their political views, including an 8-year-old boy. Whenever a society decides that one political view is correct and becomes intolerant of dissenting views, violence is sure to follow. As the German poet Heinrich Heine observed, where they burn books, they will also ultimately burn people. The same human failings that led to the Nazis are still with us today. We may not be able to change our basic human nature, but we can learn to live in a civil and responsible fashion and be tolerant of others' views, including those that we disagree with.